Hi, Elizabeth. Sorry, I'm using your voice just briefly. You hearing me okay?
I'm totally hearing you okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry to interfere with any preparations of the presentation. I'm just talking to the stream and dream team here. That's James out loud, sorry, and Elizabeth Kern, and she's doing ever so well. Yes.
That's lovely. I'm here. I'm ready.
That's fantastic. So you've got a little cat with you. That's sweet. So I'm just texting Elizabeth, not disturb you. Sorry about that. I might not be able to see it, Elizabeth, until it's actually the time, because Kevin will start at the top of the hour. Scholarsphere. But he can, oh no, it's running. Look at that. Awesome. Yes, it's on. Well done. When I shut up.
Hi, could I ask you a quick question about Speakeasy?
Yes, sure.
Um, do we need to put the text of our presentation in a note card for Speakeasy, or does it have preferences about how to do the text?
Yes, the Speakeasy has to go on a note card, and there's a maximum of 255 characters per, well, Speakeasy line, as it were. It's like a small paragraph. Yeah, like if you
Okay,
think of a
so
Google Docs, it's about 2 lines of a Google Docs.
okay, so 255 per
That's
line
it.
in
Yeah,
a
the
note card.
maximum. Yeah, that's it. And then you have to have a break after each line, and then, but don't have spaces in between.
How can I do a break without a space? A return?
Just a return, that's it.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. Thank you.
For a period, what will be a good spacer between sentences if you need it.
Good morning, everybody. I think we're about ready to begin. Feel free to speak into your mic now if you wish.
Good morning.
Hello, good
Morning.
morning.
Sound check. Good morning.
That's a nice mic. What mic
Good
are you
morning,
using?
everyone.
Good voices.
Hello.
Hi. I'm going to begin by introducing Sashi beside me, who is going to be transcribing. I'm going to type that into, because I will go off script. Try to stick to it as much as I can. I have all the text aligned for accessibility purposes, and Sashi will help. So let's begin. Thanks, first of all, for allowing me to manifest here. The program says Padrig Merlin as my SL name. That was a long time ago, in 2007 to 2009, when Hotmail existed and forgotten passwords were once retrievable. Today, I am a newly incarnated old noob with a name more suitable to my tendency to talk too much. I will present on VR, a VR research creation undergoing co-construction as we speak. And I'm sharing this to champion the continual experimentation with and investigations of scholarship through interactive media. Beyond SL, I'm curious how many of you have experimented with communicating what you consider scholarly beyond the written word or reading at a conference. So Y for yes or no, or W for this is too early to think about it, or please feel free to speak into the mic. My present inquiry is formed around this question. How can knowledge mobilization realized through the interactive medium of VR challenge traditional approaches to scholarship? Now you'll notice that I underline the three words medium of VR, as they could be substituted with other immersive and interactive media, such as the one we're currently in. The objective of this presentation is to, one, explain my motivation and define what I mean by the scholarly, and two, present examples of the scholarly through media other than the written word. A third would be to share parts of the scholar's VR wasteland and explain how we'll plan to investigate the scholarly in virtual reality. As attached as we may be to our high-fidelity academic head-mounted displays through which we critique, demonize, champion, and ridicule manifestations of scholarship beyond the written word, it might be in our best interest to consider how non-academics respond to language characterized by circumlocution of jargon, or, easier said, the gobbledygook of our scholarly. This is the problem with our problematic pillars. Shielded from those perceptions by a hardened hubris. And what I've called a who gaff, or a who gives a fuck attitude, is not helpful if we even have a squeak of curiosity as to what those outside the corridors of peer review and the many who rarely attend the libraries of our discipline-specific archives might think. For the most part, when others outside the somewhat inaccessible universe of the university consider what the hell we do, there is a somewhat assumed misperception of overly complicated ideas, maybe even like this one. These are emblazoned through the written word and may have no impact on the real. One mistruth that I've discovered pervades that scholarship is mainly articulated through passive media, information only flowing in one direction and predominantly from static text to reader. It's not difficult to interpret why that may be, Interpretations of scholarship within more popular forms of media like blog posts, television, online videos, and even stand-up comedians demonize the value of the scholarly, referring to it as incomprehensible jargon. As well, it's difficult to decipher findings that may be of significance, pun intended, to society, regardless of how inaccurate the translation may be. For example, this peanut butter and jelly of a fake news bit, which I'm sure many of you have seen. Now, while we don't assume that readers are passive, most media through which the scholarly is communicated or mistranslated is not reliant on the reader to effect any change in its originally intended information flow. Trolls aside, these online publications that allow more invested readers to comment with a text, meme, or video offer some hope of asynchronous interactions. And what an ideal moment to break the flow of this presentation by asking you, the audience, to message everyone with scholarly thoughts of the highest magnitude. Give it a go. Either speak them out or type them out now, should you have any. Beautiful. Oh, nice. I'll continue now. While many would argue that there is nothing problematic about scholarship represented through journals, book chapters, online open access portals, editorials, treatises, white papers, dictionaries, and other dominantly written media, particularly if these are the go-to status quo exemplars of scholarship for discipline-specific researchers, scholars, students, and faculty. Wow, that was a long sentence. After all, institutional scholars, like many of us, face the all-too-real necessity of having our work published and reviewed in publication portals that are essential knowledge mobilizers for their specific communities of practice. Halliday 2008 reveals, based on a UK higher education funded study, that, quote, scholarship communication refers not to an output, but to an iterative process in which scholarship is communicated, used, and developed within a community. It's a really bad English accent. My apologies. Still, if one of the main purposes of publication, no matter the media used to do so, is to effectively communicate our scholarship as we define it, are we not interested in our scholarly work reaching a broader audience? And what does that even mean, a broader audience? Should we not question why our scholarship through the medium of the written word still dominates most knowledge domains, especially if there are few who may in fact read it? Now, to misdirect your attention in an evasive act to not answer either question, in their study and review of literature of researchers as authors and researchers as readers, Mabin Heyman discussed a worrying asymmetry that researchers as authors want to publish more, while as readers, they want to read less. Oh boy. Smithsonian Magazine, I discovered, reported that the average scientific article is read by about 10 people. And half of these articles are never read at all. I don't think that's a surprise to many of us. But why should it matter? Especially if those few who read our work affirm our research, and that validation leads to job security and promotion. Gordon answers our question, thankfully, proposing that academia's incentive structure is such that it's better to publish something than nothing, even though that something may be read by no one, or at least the very few. Thank you, Jazz. Yeah, good insight. I have a colleague as well who's a librarian at UBC in the Kerner Library, and she has commented very similarly. And it's right now, she used the term distressing, but also she's completely open to new technologies that may inform new directions with what our scholarly looks like and what mediums it's communicated through. So I'll continue. Just captured that thought, which I really loved. Okay, back into this complicated player. Hit the next slide. Hit the next. Yeah, I think it is probably because it's expensive as well. Yeah, good point. Although they weren't clear in the article, this is a comment regarding the article of 10 readers or less. They didn't actually pool necessarily. You'll see it in my references at the end, and you can check for yourself. But I don't think they necessarily pooled articles that were high tier and expensive necessarily. They tried to do a broader reach out in terms of that. All right. I put up a giant block of text, and I've always been told, don't put up a giant block of text. So while I put up the giant block of text on the screen, I'll also read. Behind their copyright. Cool. Those researchers and scholars resistant or oblivious to new forms of scholarship outside their normalized paradigms may naturally take offense at critiques that call the writing and scholarship pretentious. I don't know if many of you have faced this, which impugns their character or being non-rigorous, which impugns their mind. Love that quote from Eubanks and Schaefer, 2008, also will be in my references. These entrenched warriors of old, perhaps I'm using a dead metaphor, may remain indifferent to mobilizing their written work to reach a broader readership. Yet regardless of our ingrained biases, we may benefit from exploring new forms of scholarship that reach audiences outside the academic community through different genres. And again, I recognize that many of you already know this. And to that end, there exist scholars across disciplines who accept, experiment with, and investigate alternative types of publication beyond the written word as a form of scholarship. These alternative manifestations of scholarship that break the convention of the passively imbibed written word as historical outliers across media each offer a variety of different types of experiences with scholarly content, including experimental presentations and readings at conferences, symposia, and other formal meeting places, online video and machinima, on YouTube video, others, immersive virtual worlds like this one, and social scholarship through Twitter, Facebook, Insta, whatever's Twitch, and on and on and on. I'm particularly inspired by this gentleman, Slovenian film critic that many of you may know, Slavoj Žižek, explaining the purpose of philosophy from the comfort of his own bed. This is simple, yet brilliantly staged performative example, demonstrating that the articulation of the scholarly can be captured anywhere and anytime, and especially off podium. The recording of scholarly interactions using the real-time computer graphics engines in player immersive virtual worlds like this one, like Quake, Halo, Grand Theft Auto, World of Warcraft that was mentioned yesterday, and many others that have already been presented that many of you already know about. And their mobilization on popular media sharing networks like Twitch, YouTube, and video have resulted in a number of mods and machinima creations, some of which Diary of a Camper, I believe, is 1996. It's commonly used as an example of one of the first machinima. Now, some of these propose self-reflective cultural critiques, philosophical inquiry of life as video game character and their adventures, and a post-structural deconstruction of multiplayer behavior. GTA Z, Diary of a Camper, as I mentioned, Red versus Blue, very popular at a certain point. This Spartan Life, Elitist Jerks was mentioned the other day. Tons of Minecraft Fieros popping up everywhere all the time. The list goes on, and it's a good long list. Manifestations of the scholarly that offer varying levels of interactivity, such as auto-generated writing, video games, massive online worlds, and VR experiences are more difficult to locate, but they do exist. We draw from Jensen, who defines interactivity as a measure of a media's potential ability to let the user exert an influence on the content and or form of the mediated communication as it occurs. Simple enough examples, if you are a programmer, that is, propose auto-generated programs that a reader-user can initiate. An example of this is Cypher. And Cypher is trickery, it's hack, it's commentary. It's hiding text messages within scientific conference advertisements. And I will also include the link to Cypher at the end of this press. I'm also a fan of the online auto-generated texts of Bullock, who started in 2000, including Postmodernism Generator, which I have on my iPad, but it's also available online. Again, links included. Adolescent poetry, hilarious, and band names. These are all creative ways for a reader/user to reload the page with different text, and therefore different meaning. It involves some level of victory. Aspects of the scholarly, as many of you know, have been demonstrated in This Spartan Life, an older webisodic series that captured live interviews within a multiplayer first-person shooter environment. Halo, if none of you know what that is, I'm sorry. Now, an example of the art form of machinima. What is less known about This Spartan Life is that the process of making it involved video capture of live gameplay, just as in other mods and emergent gameplay as demonstrated in WoW and many other MMOs and MMORPGs. This Spartan Life, for example, tasked interviewees from a variety of intellectual disciplines to discuss their work while trying to not get killed by players not associated with the initiative. This was in the early multiplayer first-person version of Halo. Of course, we have Sensar, Stop Crying, a multiplayer VR experience that Linden Labs broke my heart in a recent announcement of, we can't do this anymore. Very sad about this. But like its inspiration here in Second Life, both propose a number of social mini-worlds where the scholarly can be designed for and experienced by others. Second Life, for me in particular, allows users to shape and create the world they're in. So to Sensar, this is an amazing feature. The scholarly, as we can tell from this conference and other experiences that many of you have, is alive and well in SL. SL users have held many academic discussions of ideas just as we are now. This is a shot of me in 2007, I believe, with Sashi, presenting on projects at the Master of Digital Media program, where I continue to teach as an elephant. This is an example, another screenshot, courtesy of Sashi, where we taught a bunch of grad students to improvise in an improv class. And yes, I'm still a noob. So we come to VR. And in terms of VR, one of my favorite experiences thus far is virtual reality, which offers the user an AI-driven universe that simultaneously manifests as a metacritical experience about VR itself. While not as overt as the intention of an academic to publish works that reflect their own research or scholarly discipline, each example that I've presented represents some characteristic elements of the scholarly. So what does that mean? It leads us to an important task to be able to conceptualize the scholarly, and especially for its manifestations in VR. In identifying characteristics of the scholarly, I feel we might better understand how VR can afford a type of scholarly experience. Part of the answer to doing so lies in our need to understand the experience of scholarly writing through the bias and perception of those within academic communities, in addition to the experience outside of those communities. For example, online newspaper video blogs and critiques. While critiques of academic writing and its inaccessibility are common enough, and classic books on how to write academic prose have been around for decades, there are a few scholarly reviews whose direct intention has been to operationalize the experience of reading the scholarly across disciplines. Boyer et al., again in my references, they attempted such a feat, and their 4 dimensions of scholarship, discovery, integration, teaching, and application, have been used to conceptualize an emerging type of social scholarship across social media channels like Instagram and Facebook. Wikis, media sharing services, blogging sites, microblogging services like Twitter, like social bookmarking, bibliographic management tools like Zotero, and presentation sharing tools. Of particular resonance to my investigation, our investigation, in part due to the richness of their language, is Boyer et al.'s concept of integration, described as the process of illuminating data in a revealing way, often educating non-specialists too. We come to an important part. In our efforts to conceptualize a VR experience of the scholarly, we adopt a human-centered design approach. That approach involves comparing the user experience of the scholarly in VR to that of the reader experience as a primary type of recognized human interaction with the scholarly. Now, there is little research or writing that has been undertaken that reveals an understanding of the reader experience of scholarly writing across disciplines. Most of the literature of scholarly practices tends to focus on defining the scholarly based on specific disciplinary practices. It makes sense. Okoli et al., on the subject of scholarship and scholarly research on Wikipedia, summon a statement that can be applied to many different forms of scholarship. None has specifically focused on the readers and issues concerning its readership. While difficult to rely on an agreed-upon instrument that operationalizes the reading experience of academic writing, we can still locate and draw from some research that attempts to understand reading attitude. Drawing from their components of academic reading attributes that are behavioral, cognitive, and affective, we find Isaacson et al.'s behavioral attributes of reading to most resonate with the intention of this study. These attitudes are influenced by how effectively a person approaches and performs the task of reading. From Isaacson, I discovered a 20-item instrument in which there are useful questions that might infer specific design features that we can implement in our VR experience. Here are some of them. A little bit of an overwhelming table, but it gives you an idea of where this type of research is going on, trying to at least find some type of comparison with the reader experience transposed to the experience of VR. Compared to the scant literature on the experience of reading the scholarly within academic communities, there exist dozens of online articles and blogs from a variety of sources that reveal a critical public perception attitude of academic scholarship. I'm interested, therefore, in contrasting behavioral attributes of academic and non-academic experiences of apprehending the scholarly in order to inform the user experience of the scholarly in VR. And that table is the first iteration of the reader experience of a non-academic audience compared. These have influenced the interactions being implemented in the current Scholars VR prototype, which I will come to very shortly. As behavioral attributes of reading may not be validated through qualitative or quantitative instruments, we use the word may to propose the possibility of. Here are some of the questions that were generated from an instrument. The experience of the scholarly in VR will be highly dependent on creating engaging interactions in VR, and these will be informed by a number of intersecting attributes in regards to content and usability. In this instrument, I draw from O'Brien and Tom's review of the literature on engagement through the different types of engaging interactions, particularly during video gameplay, that are proposed by Weedy et al. And these include focused attention, measuring user attention and interest. 2, perceived usability, measuring the capacity for the technology to not get in the way of the experience. A challenge, for sure, for VR. Aesthetic attributes that measure participant responses to the oral and visual affordances of VR. And 4, satisfaction attributes that measure the novelty of VR, endurability within it, and how much fun the experience was. Catch up to my slides. I'll continue. If you can hold the question on that to the end, that'd be great. So now that I've discussed a review of other mediums exploring the scholarly, and bored some of you to tears in an attempt to operationalize the scholarly as it might translate from the reader's user experience to a scholarly one, I will show some of the features that are still at a conceptual stage, designed to engage non-academic audiences in their experience of the scholarly. This low-fidelity, fake AI bot is your host in the VR wasteland, setting up the expectations of an incomplete virtual world. A neglected world where various programmed characters have evolved and appear to have intelligence. The fake AI bot is also a bridge that continuously breaks the fourth wall between an immersant's virtual and real-world experience. Their agenda is simple: escape the virtual world. For anyone who's coulrophobic, the next slide, you may want to turn away. Some visual inspiration is taken from abandoned amusement parks, leading to an overall creepy academic feel for this evolving world. The clown, of course, has inspired clown characters within the environment. We place immersants in the world with the daunting task of locating the missing story and meaning of an academic post-structural book, attempting to understand manifestations of the clown and their association with fear and horror. These are low-res clown boxes, each associated with sentences and paragraphs in the Book of the Clown. The goal is to collect these, then to rearrange them to co-construct new meaning. Here are more recent higher res versions. The rides of the amusement park offer a recent visual stimulus for our team. You can see this beautiful skeleton merry-go-round, which inspired my artist to construct this in a few days, which was very impressive. This abandoned amusement park in Saudi Arabia is now part of our evolving vocabulary. This has inspired a kind of desert wasteland depicted here in low-res polys in the Unity 3D game engine. And what we're working on creating is a seemingly infinite landscape with half-buried buildings, sand, footsteps, and fog. Here's more inspiration. Now, inside of the world, there are many portals. These portals lead immersants to many worlds where a scholarly theme or a specific scholar's work will be highlighted. This room challenges, for example, an immersant to pick up a chalice that is the lost Holy Grail. However, picking any of the chalices up provides an oral history of the Grail that needs to be arranged in a particular order in order to escape this room. There's a lot of humor in this world and a lot of self-criticism on not just the scholarly. It could be called satiric. It's also a critique inspired by virtual reality on VR itself. So this image depicts Boris's Barophony radio, appearing randomly in the desert wasteland, complete with interactive dials that let the immersant listen to academic sound poetry, reading from a number of classic academic papers, read in boring English, boring Chinese, and boring Russian. This was a preliminary design for our vodka cosmonaut, who appears in a cloud above the radio when a sound poem of the same name and type is heard. Engaging members outside our academic communities with our scholarly work beyond the written word will enact new experiences and provoke discussion that we hope are heated, at risk of sounding a societal alarm that our inner cynics may find unpalatable for the ears. We draw from Boyer et al.'s repeated proclamation that if we are to sustain the vitality of higher education in our time, a new vision of scholarship is required, one that's dedicated to not only to the renewal of the academy, but ultimately to the renewal of society itself. We are convinced, with complete untested bias, that the scholars VR research creation will, regardless of its success in engaging participants, draw them into experiencing other forms of scholarship beyond the written word. Scholars VR offers us, as a community of scholars, of which 17 form a part of this project, an opportunity to bridge our at times difficult to understand worlds with new types of media that might engage members of society who fail to understand the value or the point of scholarly writing. Our initiative may not revolutionize academic writing, nor scholarship generally, but like previous experimental forms, it is an important prototype. A user test of the scholarly, it's a user test of the scholarly whose results may inspire disruptive forms of scholarship that have broader appeal beyond the misperceived semantic borders of what we call the scholarly. Thank you very much for your attention and interest. I will, in the next slide, there's an abundance of references as well as links. Reach out to me at this email address if you want more resources or within Second Life. And thank you very much. I'm happy to take some questions. I think we have a little bit of time, probably 10 or 15 minutes. Thank you. Survey results are not yet there because I'm trying to type as I speak. Because of COVID-19, we have postponed the investigation until the fall. The investigation will be at a university library. So they were reluctant in early March to make it happen. What the initiative has also inspired is a new cleansing process for VR headsets. Anyone interested in that? Kind of crazy. All participants basically need to clean prior to wearing a headset in front of our research assistant, and participants also need to witness the headset being cleaned. This is not currently best practice, but it makes sense. Yeah. Yes. Mike, please.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I run a VR company called Educational Virtual Worlds.
Nice.
I went to a conference about a month ago where there was a lot of discussion about cleaning headsets.
Oh, good.
And I've also done presentations in public spaces like museums. And so there's a concern with the general public. The consensus at the last conference was, so it depends upon what headset you're using, how you're using them. If you're using the Go, you're in good shape. What the
that's good
presenter
to know.
there said is you can basically rip the thing apart. You can take out the straps. You can pull out the handle. And she recommended, she did like 18 of them for her class. She
Wow.
would put them in with the dishwasher along with an anti-lysing agent
Wow.
and OxyClean to really clean them, and then she ran them through the dryer and reassembled them. You can't do that with a Rift because they're all one piece. So I've talked to my doctor. He said basically what you want to do is rip the foam out. Anything that's a porous surface is at risk of contamination. So you rip out those porous surfaces, and then you're left with the hard surfaces, which you can rub down with alcohol wipes, or you can spray it. I don't like the spray because it gets in the electronics, but I found that you can pretty quickly clean the hard parts. And my doctor said clean the inside and outside where your fingers are touching the headset.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's.
It's going to be
thank
more
you.
of a pain, but we got to do it.
That's really great. Did you have any intel on the lenses themselves on the units, because I know that alcohol, there's different opinions in terms of whether or not you should use alcohol on lenses because it might damage them. Did you have any suggestions on how to clean the lenses? Because that's harder for me to find.
No, I haven't. Realized
Okay.
before this conference, I never gave it a thought. I mean, I've literally run a one riff through all students in my class, and
Right.
we ran it through 85 students at the museum the last time I presented without a problem. I mean, but this is before coronavirus.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's great. Well, thank you, everyone. Other questions, please feel free to email me. I'm going to I'm happy to share the slides. I'm also happy to share the notes that I had. I also have a Word doc. I tore this apart. It was intended to be a written article as well and submitted in that way. But I had to tear it apart to make it more readable in many ways today. So that was a lot of what you were experiencing today. So that's my website. Again, this is all, I can send everyone these links. In my website, I'm also exploring the written word experimentally in terms of its potential for scholarship, in a different type of scholarship, more one that's more self-critical, improvised, random. Those are some of my inspirations. Elsewhere.org, I think that's a link to the postmodernism generator by Bullock. Really great work. Cipher, the link is also in the text here. This steam-powered game is virtual reality. Really highly recommended. I think Day, you've probably experienced it if you're still there. Just love this work. I met the developers about 3 years ago when they were just at the cusp of getting this complete. I'm just going to race through here and just click for all the references for those of you who would like to check it out. Oh, I didn't know it looped back to the first line. Awesome. I just introduced myself. Once again, thank you everybody for your focused attention, and have a great rest of the conference. And thanks, Sashi, and also thank you to Olive. Oh my God, Olive Tree, thank you so much for mentoring me through this process. Totally amazing. Thanks, Jerry.